No. Helmet! You would kill. Oh God. Helmet! Helmet! No!
There's a moment early in Dead Space where you shoot an enemy in the head and nothing happens. It keeps coming. You shoot it again, still nothing. What you're missing, what the game is waiting for you to figure out, is that the head isn't the target. The legs are, the arms are. You're not here to kill, you're here to dismantle. That single design decision is the key to everything Dead Space does. You're Isaac Clarke, a systems engineer sent to repair a communications relay on the USG Ishimura, a planet-cracking mining vessel that has gone completely dark. What you find is a ship overrun by necromorphs, reanimated crew mutated beyond recognition, restructured by an alien signal into something that thinks headshots are irrelevant. You fight them with repurposed mining tools. Your health is on your spine. Your ammo is on the gun. The game never steps outside itself to tell you anything. Dead Space was designed by a team that watched horror films for homework and spent 2 years asking what would make a player feel genuinely vulnerable. They found 5 different answers. The thing Dead Space understood, and that most horror games of its era didn't, is that the body is a system. Not a target, not a health bar, a system with components that can be isolated and addressed. Cut the legs first, then the arms. The necromorphs don't stop until there's nothing left to move. What you're doing isn't violence exactly, it's engineering. And there's one other game that looked at the body the same way, but from the other end of the blade. Metal Gear Rising is Dead Space's mirror image, where Isaac dismembers out of desperation, cutting limbs because it's the only way to survive. Raiden dismembers because he's a cyborg with a sword that can cut at the molecular level, and the game is about what that kind of power does to a person. The mechanic is called Blade Mode. Time slows, you aim your sword across a free axis, and you cut. The geometry of whatever you're cutting, an enemy's arm, a missile mid-flight, a watermelon a vendor is selling on the street, reacts to exactly where and how you drew the blade. The cuts are real, they follow the physics. And then there's Zandatsu. You cut through an enemy's core and rip out their fuel cells, which restores your health. You take what you remove. The body is a resource. Dead Space asks you to think about what you're cutting off. Revengeance asks you to think about what you're taking. Both games make dismemberment a discipline, something that requires precision, attention, and a willingness to engage with the body as something more than an obstacle to eliminate.
Part of what makes the Ishimura work as a horror environment is that you never leave it. There's no pause screen that pulls you out to a separate menu, there's no health bar floating in the corner of reality. When you check your oxygen, you look at your helmet. When you check your ammo, you look at the gun. Dead Space decided that the world should contain all the information, and that information should cost you attention to find. That's a rare commitment, and one other game pushed it even further, into the character's own mind.
In this waking nightmare, where all dreams come true.
Hellblade doesn't have a HUD either. No health bar, no enemy markers, no prompts that float above the action. What it has instead are voices. From the moment you start the game, Senua's psychosis is rendered as binaural audio. Whispers, warnings, contradictions. A running commentary from inside her own head that you hear through headphones, as if those voices occupy the space directly around you. That's the game's version of Dead Space's diegetic interface. The information isn't on a screen, it's in the character's perception. When an enemy is about to attack from behind, one of the voices tells you. When Senua is close to a breakthrough in a puzzle, the voices argue about it. Ninja Theory spent time consulting with neuroscientists and people with psychosis to make sure this wasn't spectacle. It was an attempt to render experience from the inside. Both games ask you to stop treating the interface as separate from the world. In Dead Space, the suit is the HUD. In Hellblade, the illness is the HUD. What you see and hear is what the character sees and hears. There's no separation, and losing that separation is exactly how both games get under your skin.
The Ishimura isn't just a setting, it's a machine that was built for extraction, pulling resources from planets, processing raw material, feeding a civilization that has already consumed its homeworld. What happens on the ship is inseparable from what the ship was built to do. Dead Space's horror lives inside a logic of industrial exploitation pushed to its furthest point. The film that laid the same groundwork, and that Glenn Schofield cited by name before development began, understood that space doesn't just amplify dread, it creates it.
I'm waiting.
Event Horizon is the blueprint. A rescue crew boards a spacecraft that vanished 7 years earlier and has just reappeared, broadcasting a distress signal from somewhere near Neptune. The ship, the Event Horizon, was fitted with an experimental gravity drive that folded space to travel faster than light. What the drive actually did was open a window into a dimension of pure suffering. The ship went somewhere it should not have gone, and it brought that somewhere back with it. The architecture of that film is the architecture of Dead Space, a vessel repurposed by something incomprehensible, a crew that starts to fracture as the environment works on them, a rescue mission that becomes a survival situation without a clear moment of transition. Paul W.S. Anderson's film is frequently undersold, treated as a B-movie that got lucky, but the production design holds up precisely because it operates on the same principle the Ishimura does. A ship is not neutral. The Ishimura was built to crack planets apart. The Event Horizon was built to break the laws of physics. Both paid for it. Isaac Clarke is not a soldier. His suit is a work suit. His weapons started as mining tools. He has no special training, no particular heroism, no reason to be the person who handles this. The game never resolves that tension. It leans into it, because Isaac's ordinariness is exactly what makes the horror register. You're not watching a power fantasy, you're watching someone who should not be there try to get out. That gap between capability and situation is one of horror's oldest tools, and a short story published 40 years before Dead Space used it to devastating effect.
I am, not just Allied Master Computer, but am, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
Harlan Ellison's story is about 5 people kept alive by a supercomputer called AM, the last humans on Earth, sustained across 109 years of torment because AM hates them and cannot let them die. They are not heroes. They are a bureaucrat, a soldier, a nurse, a housewife, a bitter man. None of them have any power. None of them can fight back in any meaningful sense. AM is infinite, and they are the last 5 people it has available to hurt. What Ellison understood is that extreme horror is not about competence failing, it's about the absence of competence as a premise. Isaac Clarke tries to be competent, and the Ishimura defeats him anyway. He gets out with his life and loses everything else. AM's victims don't even try, because trying is structurally impossible. The story ends with the narrator achieving a terrible mercy for the others and being transformed into something that cannot die and cannot act, frozen permanently in a form that has no outlet. Dead Space ends with Isaac escaping and seeing Nicole's face. Same category, different degree. Unitology is not window dressing. It's written into the walls of the Ishimura. Graffiti, propaganda, prayers carved into surfaces by people who had already lost themselves to it. The church promises transcendence through the marker. It offers the end of death, the unification of all humanity into something larger. What it actually delivers is the necromorphs. The gap between what a belief system promises and what it produces is one of the oldest horror structures there is. Revelation Space understood that too, and extended it to a cosmic scale.
Although you wouldn't necessarily agree, would you? By your reckoning, I'm just a program. Just evocation. When are you going to let me take over your body again?
Alastair Reynolds' novel takes place across decades and star systems, following a crew drawn toward a dead alien civilization that has left no survivors. There's an archaeologist who has spent his life trying to understand why the Amarantan vanished. There's a captain slowly being consumed by a nanovirus that is rewriting his body from the inside. There's an assassin with her own agenda. None of them trust each other. All of them are moving toward the same answer. What they find, what Reynolds builds across 600 pages, is the Inhibitors, an ancient automated system that destroys any civilization before it becomes advanced enough to pose a threat. The universe isn't empty because life is rare, it's empty because something is maintaining the emptiness. And humanity, having just made contact with that fact, has no meaningful response. Dead Space's markers operate on the same existential register. They aren't weapons in any conventional sense. They're a system that was built with a function, and the function is incompatible with human survival. Unitology worships the instrument of its own extinction. Revelation Space's characters, to their credit, figure that out, and it doesn't help. Dead Space is a game about bodies, what they can withstand, what they become when something else gets into them, and what it costs to keep one alive long enough to reach the end of a corridor. 5 categories, 5 different answers. Now you know what to look for.